Feels like you've come home, doesn't it? Home to the center of your being. Reverend Sue was scheduled to talk today, but her grandson, Corey, was born, and we're just thrilled about that. 8 pounds, and they induced her Thursday night and had the baby Friday night, so it was a long journey. Long journey. So there's some pictures on the door if you didn't notice them on your way in. So we switched Sundays because, Grandma just can't be torn away from a brand new baby. So I'm doing my talk that would happen next week. So she'll be here and can do her talk later. And this month we're referencing a book called True Refuge, Finding Peace and Freedom in Your Own Awakened Heart. And there are copies in the bookstore if you're interested. And it's about leaving home. It's about those times like with the birth of a grandson. Here comes a baby that's chosen his parents, chosen his brand new parents, and has the courage of the soul to come into this world, a world that sometimes we describe as difficult or challenging. And the author of this book says, over time, we begin to develop what she calls a space suit, a little suit around us that shows who we are. And over time, this space suit that projects who we are can get really defensive about life and maybe have a defensive anger when somebody says something to us, or we become obsessed with something, or we do what we have to say and feel in order to feel safe and secure on our own. So that's our persona. She calls it a spacesuit. I thought that was a nice way of explaining it. But these negative strategies are temporary, and often it can eliminate joy and happiness and spontaneity in our life. It can feel more like a prison. Oh, this is what people expect me to be like. I have to stay in that persona of who I've been projecting to the world. So we are no longer true to ourselves, our true nature, that sweet baby innocence that came into the world. We've created a spacesuit that projects a different image. And so it can create a lot of judgments about ourselves, can create a lot of anxiety, it can create a lot of anger to the point where we now are the spacesuit. We can't even see within. It's kind of like going into a trance, if you've ever had that feeling. It becomes who you are, even though it's not necessarily serving you in that way. We've forgotten about this mysterious presence that is always with us, always surrounding us and within us. It's kind of like being in a dream. A trance can make us feel cut off from the rest of the world. It feels like we've left home. We're in a different place. We're not at home. And when the rain comes, we begin to look for a refuge. Where is it that I can feel safe? The author said at one point, she decided she had to go to ashrams, several ashrams, to purify herself, to purify her ego, and to get rid of any aggression or selfishness that she was feeling. She was an excellent yoga teacher, like the best of the best, but she never felt she was good enough. Her goal was to be absolutely perfect. Anybody know that feeling? Anybody know how it's elusive? Perfection can be elusive. And so striving to be perfect puts you in a whole different other trance. You're always knocking yourself. And so she became very trapped and feeling disgusted with herself. She sought out false refuges, false places to feel better. She overworked, overconsumed. She tried to control everybody else. She accumulated power and accumulated possessions. And her identity turned from what could have been an excellent yoga teacher to an aggressive and controlling person that nobody wanted to be around. That's when our ego, our small self, is unaware of our inner self, who we really are. She was covering up anything she didn't want to see, but she was covering up with negative emotions. Then one day there was the still small voice from within. Thank God. This voice said, "What would it be like if you didn't try to do anything? What would it be like if you didn't try to control everything? What would that be like?" She realized that she had a fear so deep it was like a vice around her neck. She was so afraid of that. She had that familiar sinking feeling when you have shame for something you did when you were a child and it's still with you and you've been hiding it this whole time. But all of a sudden, she went into a deep, deep meditation and her heart opened. She said, "How sad it is that I've been living in a confined world. How sad it is that I've been so driven, and how sad it is now that I feel so alone." She felt that old sense of herself falling away, but then it was replaced by, well, then who am I? In the silence, she started to feel at home. Because we really find true refuge when we recognize the power of the silence of inner awareness. Because we're so busy striving, achieving, doing, we forget when our heart is open, we feel tenderness and love. It took her quite some time, but eventually she realized, I love this sentence, "Perfection is not a prerequisite for anything but pain." You know that. You know that. Perfection just brings pain. So we find true refuge when we come home to our true nature. And that means we're loving life no matter what. We aren't depending on anyone or anything to make us happy. We are content within ourselves. When we feel like that, there's these little nudges that keep coming along. Are you done with that? Aren't you afraid of this or scared of that? But when we're truly home, we can handle whatever comes along. Life sometimes has different ideas about what that means. Like the little soul just born, having the courage to be born. When we really experience true refuge, we've really come home. And there's an Indian teacher who explained it this way. On realization of your true nature, you feel complete, fulfilled, free, yet not always able to explain what happened. But when the veil of the trance lifts, pleasure and pain, hopes and fears that were bound up in our small space suit no longer define us. We no longer feel like something is wrong with us, and instead we begin to trust life. We trust the innocence of life, the goodness of life. Another way to explain this, leaving home, coming home, I found in the book the I Ching. Now, if you're a Chinese student, I know that's not how you pronounce it, but that's how I pronounce it this morning. And I have the book, The Living the I Ching, and the author translates the word I Ching into the word changes. For example, when the sun rises, the moon sets. When the moon sets, the sun rises. Changes. It represents one of the major assertions in this philosophy, because everything is limitless. The universe is limitless, and yet everything is seen as yin and yang, polar opposites like light and dark, hot and cold, up and down, hard and soft. The opposites are not static. Their balance is in constant flux. It's constantly shifting and changing. A complete view of changes, or the I Ching, require years of study. The book is just definitely would require years of my study. But here's some summary points. Nature, society, and individuals all act through cyclical change. Now, I could look back in my life and see many cycles of change, positive, negative, up and down, hot and cold. Many cycles of change in life. And the cycles of change are driven by the polar opposites of yin and yang. A cycle reaches its zenith only to descend. A cycle reaches its bottom only to ascend. Ethical acts that we do reinforce life and are beneficial changes. Selfish acts increase our isolation and our destructive cycles. So, looking back in life, it's been a long life so far, and I can see those cycles of ethical acts and selfish acts and how that resulted in changes. It says, cultivated persons are not sad when misfortune occurs. They use the occasion to seek errors within. They cultivate humanity. They fend off further misfortune. They become modest and careful, grateful and reverent, and prepare for the future of change. Wise persons advocate spirituality. Congratulations, you're wise. Humility, reverence, and service to others as the highest standard, because all endings are only transitions to more change. And it all begins in silence. Pure silence, emptiness of silence. It's like silence at midnight when you sit out on a porch. It's so silent. Unless there's millions of crickets, or when birds are asleep. I think about that. They're usually still standing up, I think. I don't know. But when they're asleep, you can imagine silence, because in the morning they're chirping like crazy. And that moment, that part of silence before the sun rises, if you're out in the early morning air, it's so silent. And then when snow comes, it's so silent. And it covers a field, and that field represents the future. How are you going to walk in that field of snow? What pathways are you going to create? Because beware, the sun is going to come and the snow is going to go away in the silence. So silence is not the end, it's just the beginning. It's the beginning of that new what? Unbelievable potentiality, infinite potentiality. I remember when we went to Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, and we had rented a beautiful cabin with the full view of the Tetons and the river and the grasses, and it was so spectacular. We sat there for hours. And it was so spectacular to watch the sun come across the mountains, and you'd have light and dark, but it never stayed the same. It was constantly changing, light and dark, light and dark, light and dark. Then when the sun started to go down, so to speak, it changed the color of everything. The gold grasses were now like cinnamon colored, and everything changed. That's what life is, constant change, but appreciating all these changes, the minutia that's involved in change. It's just incredible. In the I Ching, it calls it pure interaction, constantly pure interaction. The author said, well, we can't really figure it all out by digging up the dirt and seeing what's changing. We can't block the sun, then it would all be dark, and we can't block the darkness because then it wouldn't be light. And it takes this consistent, pure interaction, the yin and yang of life. It can be really subtle. If you've ever been in a rainforest, we were in Costa Rica and went on one of those cables that went through the rainforest. And it's just amazing. If you tried to look at every leaf and the sunlight on that leaf and then its shadow on the ground, you can't catch it fast enough. Everything's moving, everything's changing. If you tried to watch the water below the canopy of the forest and the little bugs, skirting around on the top of the water never stays the same. It's always changing. Little ripples, calmness, light and dark. That's the balance of life. The balance. It's good to check in with our balance every now and then. and see where we are. Balance is very subtle. Also, like I'm inhaling and exhaling. That's yin and yang. She even says reading has yin and yang. Each time your eye stops on a word, you're perceiving the word. That's yang. And as soon as your eye moves again, in a fraction of a second, there's no thought there at that second. That's the yin. Yin and yang of reading. Who would have thought? Now you know. Now you know. You know, our life is a period of rest and activity, sleeping, all the activities we do during the day. And yin and yang account for every experience in that. Every tension in the positive and negative, those opposites, create this balance. So there's no predestination. How could you know what to expect in a world, a universe of yin and yang? Like the author of True Refuge, many people find inner silence at an ashram. But it's time every day to take time to find the silence in our busy lives. Find that space behind our busyness. It's coming home to who we are, our true being. We exist in this boundless, limitless energy of yin and yang. So when I saw the picture of Lindy holding her baby, her smile said it all. Oh, after all those hours, to be so happy to hold her baby. And Corey, a new soul picking his parents. How wonderful it is for Lindy and her husband and for Charlie and Sue to have this little soul choose their family. I think it's just marvelous because he's going to have yin and yang experiences over time. We all know the terrible twos, all those things that people say about children as they're growing up. But with the kind of love he'll have along the way and the discipline and this spiritual philosophy, what a great life he's going to have. So I would like to do a prayer for baby Corey to jump into this yin and yang universe and just be love as he will be loved. That was quick. I don't think I missed anything. I'm just excited about baby Corey. Oh my gosh. Here is an infinite soul created in the love of God and the expression of God that's come into this life for his own reason, for a purpose we may never know, but we know and trust in God. We trust in ourselves. We trust in the process. We trust life because it's all created with love, pure love. Love, that background energy of the universe that supports us all when we're in our yin and yang, and pause for a moment to reflect on who we really are. So I know for baby Corey this morning and parents and grandparents that the love pouring out of them is setting his life up in a beautiful way. And the joy that he's already bringing to so many of us tells us a lot about his soul. I'm so grateful this morning to just be here and share these words, just share the joy that's in my heart and in yours also. It's really who we are at our core, and it is good, and so it is.